our speaker, Betsy Cooksey. She has galloping across Mongolia. Mongolia is really a very interesting country. It's very remote. Not a lot of people actually know about Mongolia. And so I wanted her to come and talk about that. But she's going to be also talking about she found 600 kids living in the city dump, And so what they've done is they're gradually bringing these children out from there and then taking others off the street so they don't have to go into the dump. And they're building new schools, they're building healthcare facilities, doing all kinds of things. So again, it's never too late for a happy childhood, right, Betsy? Okay, here's your speaker. You have her information.
I am so honored to be here. I met Sam at an energy conference in May because I showed up wearing a mink stole.
Right into the mic.
I showed up wearing a mink stole, and he's like thinking like, well, what are you doing here? Anyway, well, I have this wonderful program for Mongolia. It's magnificent minks from Mongolia. I've had 60 mink coats donated. I take them with me when I go to Mongolia, and we auction them at the Gobi Gallop Gala. And we bought in $65,000 for mink coats that are in people's closets that they're not wearing. They wear mink in Mongolia all winter. They want 5 coats, a short one, a long one, a dark one, a sporty one. So that's so he was curious about my why I was wearing this, and I said, well, I wanted the 100 mink coats that were in his grandmother's closet. But I will say that 8 years ago, Mongolia absolutely healed me. I was kind of a broke, scared, sick old girl at 65, and it was just an absolute fluke that I made a phone call to a girlfriend that I knew did Little Outward Bound for sick, scared old girls. And I said to Paula, where are you guys going this summer? I need to get out of my misery. She goes, we're going to Outer Mongolia. We're going to ride 250 miles in the outback to discover the oldest nomadic reindeer tribe on the planet. And I said, I think I need to go. And I had a wonderful, girlfriend who said, I'll lend you the $3,000 for your airfare. You need to go. And I arrived, and it just did heal me. It gave me purpose and passion. And in the last 8 years, I've just recovered my health and financial. And I live for what I can do for the families in Mongolia. So my first trip was 8 years ago. And Julie Valoo is a fascinating Canadian, and she launched the Valoo Foundation. She too had a really tough time about 15 years ago, had 4 personal losses, a son, a mom, a best friend, a sister died within 18 months, and she just figured her life was over. Her husband, who was a mining engineer in Canada, was relocated to Mongolia. And she said, fine, my life is over. Send me to Mongolia. Well, for her husband's company, she was delivering some quilts and coats to families in the dump. And the injustice of the living conditions just knocked her out. And she said, we have to do something about this. So she and her husband launched the Valoo Foundation. And their first line of business just as simply, these are economic refugees that are living in the dump, the garbage dump outside the capital city that goes forever. And climate change has been a big part of it. This is our kindergarten in the dump. So her first goal, she said, we can't have these babies in the dump. They've lost their herds to climate change, and they've frozen, or there's not enough grass. And her first goal was to relocate all the little ones under 2 years old to Gare grandmommies in Gares around the dump and keep them warm and healthy. So within about 2.5 years, she had all the 2-year-olds and under out of the dump. And then she said, well, what do we do now? Well, she discovered that a child needs to pass a first grade entrance exam to get a spot in school in Ulaanbaatar. They have a spot in Western Mongolia, but there's no Gare, there's nothing to eat, there's nothing to keep them warm. But if they pass the first grade entrance exam, they get a spot in school. So we have 300 children that we prepare. They find our centers in the dump, and we have 100% success rate in getting them into school. And maybe thank you. I'm giving a little slideshow at a little community in Southern Maryland, and I have my 7-year-old grandson and my 5-year-old grandson in the back of the car getting popcorn and snacks. And the Valoo Foundation had a first place equine film festival award-winning documentary of the Gobi Gallop from 2017, and I was going to show it and raise some money. So my little 7-year-old Liam is saying, well, honey, that's my grandmommy name. Honey, why are you doing this? And I explained to him the circumstances, and he says, oh, honey, I have $75 of birthday money and tooth fairy money, and I want you to take all of it. And then he proceeded by saying, I have everything I need. That was the beginning of my own personal I had everything I needed. So what if I don't have what I had before? I have everything I needed. So in his honor, I raised another $50,000 to finish the technology center, and we opened the library, the Liam Learning Library, in his honor. This little 7-year-old told me I had enough. His little brother was in the back seat. He's 5. His name is Rowan. And he said, well, honey, I only have $5 and I want 50 cents for a piece of candy. So he looks at his brother and says, well, how much is that? So therefore, we then have the rowing reading room named after my little row. And then so Nola Kate, she's 8, and I was taking care of her in May. And she said, honey, we've talked for 2 years about the NOLA Knitting Nook, and you haven't done anything yet. Well, I quickly wired the money immediately, and we opened the NOLA Knitting Nook in the library, and immediately we had 35 little ones join the knitting club. And all of Liam's Learning Library. It's and they have computers and homework help. And this is me this year with the little ones. And then this year, after this was my 6th trip in 8 years, I bought a gare. And you saw me with that little, and Julie Valoo, she's amazing. She looks at what does it need to keep a child alive and thrive and warm. Well, they do need housing. So what does she do was start a gare company. And she says, you buy a gare and we give a gare to a homeless family. So this year, before I left in August, I bought a gare and we delivered and set up a gare in the dump for a family that just needed a little bit more stabilizing. And so that's what we do. This is the little kindergarten. And Jolie, with her husband being in the mining business, the mining companies would donate a building that they didn't need anymore, and she would drag it over to the dump and set it up. In 2022, she led 15 of us 7 miles south of the Russian border to the Gobi, and then back over to China on the east, and riding into the sunset every night for 60 days. We did 2,000 miles on horseback in 84 days and raised another $500,000 for and at a beautiful temple in downtown Ulaanbaatar, they had the most magnificent celebration of us. Actually, of those 15 international endurance riders, 3 got married, and we have 2 babies from that 2022 experience. But the Minister of Youth came and awarded all of us with a Medal of Honor for making a difference in children's lives. I wear it proudly. Birthing my son and this medal are 2 of the most priceless things in my life. This year, this is Julie. This is at 10:35 p.m. We were challenged to try and do 100 miles in one day. And we said, fine. And the mining company said, we will match what you earned or have raised if you can do 100 miles. Now, this August, the reason I went back a second time was that my 79-year-old girlfriend out west, who took up riding at 60, for her 80th birthday, she wanted to be on a horse in Mongolia, and she wanted to see why it was that I kept going back to Mongolia. So I escorted her over there. The 100-mile day, she got on a horse at 5:15 in the morning and had done 60 miles before lunch. She's 80 years old. I thought the story was all about me. You know, I did do 100 miles that day. We did the ride like Chinggis. Every 25 miles, we got a fresh horse. But my number 3 horse was horrible. It was this skinny little white thing that just beat me to pieces. And every time I got off to take a break or have lunch, my knees literally buckled and I fell to the ground. I said, "Look, Jill, am I ruining my knees for my pickleball career? Because I'm going to get off if that's the case. I'm a very serious pickleball competitor." She said, "No, it's just extreme fatigue from that horse." So I get my 4th horse at 5:30, and this is looking better. It's one of the horses that I had ridden training for it. And I get on the horse. At this point, we had one rider that did a personal best at 25 miles, and then Sarah, the 80-year-old, did 60 before lunch, and she'd had enough. So it was just Julie Valoo and myself with the doctor, with the wranglers, trying to finish this 100 miles. And I'm lagging behind. And Julie says, "Bets, you're not going to make it this way. You need to get in the support van, get your IV, get some nourishment. I've calculated the route, and it's 105 miles. You go in the truck for 5 miles, and I'll get you back on the horse." Well, it worked. I got off the horse at 10:35 that night, and the picture in the dark is Julie and I celebrating that we did. To our knowledge, there's no other horse trek company in Mongolia that has ever successfully executed 100 miles in one day. It was 3 hours of riding in the pitch dark. There was a little sliver of a moon that kept sliding away with the clouds, and you had to find. Mongolia healed me. It taught me trust. I found joy, happiness, purpose, health. The joy that, I mean, being here today, I was just so excited to share and inspire. Just find your philanthropic journey and see where it takes you. I'm the least likely person to have had this most remarkable 7 years of rebirth, having a fabulous childhood. You know, I am putting a book together, and there's a spiritual aspect, there's an emotional aspect, there's a financial, there's a philanthropic. From what angle do you want me to speak from? I've experienced all of it and more. Any questions about the journey? Yes, sir.
There's got to be a backstory. I don't know what a gare is, and how do all the babies get to a dump? What's the backstory?
Yes, yeah. There are 15,000 families that are now living in the dump. The Russians only left in 1996. The country's had to stabilize and figure itself out. There's been economic climate change. The temperatures of 50 below zero are hitting more often than they used to. And they're very nomadic. They don't shed their animals, although we did stay in a sheep shit shed overnight one night when there was no other housing. So they've lost everything. There are too many animals. It's overgrazed. So they come to the capital city hoping to get a job washing dishes, and there's nothing. So they scavenge until they stabilize. We take these families and we teach family members trades. We have a sewing center that make all of our dells, and a dell is a sort of a quilted, beautiful garment that the Mongolians ride in and we live in when we're there. A gare is like a yurt, maybe about 200 round square feet, with a little stove in the middle that primarily is very portable, like a trailer.
So the lady was 80 years old, younger than Joe Biden, older than Donald Trump. And she rode 100 miles before noon. Is that right?
She did 60 miles before
60
noon.
before noon. So how was her legs when she got off the horse?
She's phenomenal. She's this little square girl who, turned 80, and they gave her a really good horse, and she was the only one that rode the same horse we didn't tell her it was 60 miles to lunch. Her goal was to do 50. She did 10 more than she knew she did. Actually, we had a lovely young wrangler, 30-year-old Mongolian that is part of the ownership of Horseback Mongolia, Zula, who was our magnificent guide that day. And he's a young man with 4 little ones at home, and he could do the 100 miles, but he didn't get out of bed for the next 3 days. He was so sore. Julie Valoo, the 64-year-old, Sarah, the 80-year-old, me, the 72-year-old, drove the horses back home the next day. Yeah.
So you changed horses every 25 miles.
Yes.
Except the lady who's 80. She rode it for
60 on one horse.
Well, you're an amazing person. Amazing. Really something.
It's stunning. It was July that I was beginning to wrap around my head that I could possibly do this. When I first got involved 8 years ago, I said, wow, I'm going to go to the Gobi Gala because it is a spectacular production, because I would watch it remotely, never thinking that I could do the Gobi Gallop, which is 40 miles a day, 10 days in a row. Well, I've done it twice now. And then I did the 2,000 mile. You can do whatever you want, honey, if you have a team that will support you. If you think you can, and if you find a way. I watched Diane Nyad, the girl that failed, at 28 and 34 and 61 and 62 to swim from Cuba to Florida. She finally did it at 64. She carved it. She figured out what angle. I worked on it with nutrition, with training, with the right horse, a saddle pad, suspension stirrups. I've done the Gobi Gallop where the bottom of my feet are just, women lose collagen in their face and the bottom of their feet. My feet would burn from standing in the stirrups. Mongolian horses only canter and trot. They do not walk. So you have all this pressure on the bottom of your feet. So I finally got suspension stirrups. So you find a way. But the most important, because I told Julie Valoo, I'm going to do this. I've got a, Crohn's, and I have to be very careful what I eat. And she said, we will support you. We will have a doctor there at the camp the day before to give you an IV, and we will have one that watches and travels the whole 100 miles with us. So find a team that supports you. And I'm still flabbergasted that we actually did that. To our knowledge, no other Mongolian horse trekking company has successfully executed 100 miles in one day. And actually, you don't need to. We now know just 75 is plenty to do it from dawn to dusk. The 3 hours in the dark was kind of a tricky, you're like going downhill, and then he jumps. Well, I guess it was a stream, and now we're going up in a duck. But we got there safely and had a party. You find a way, you find your team, and you think you can. And wow. Yes, sir.
Well, I think I got the answer to this question as you talked about nutrition and training and all that, but you said you got many health benefits from this change. And I'm wondering exactly, would you want us all to go ride a horse 100 miles? I'm from Texas. I've ridden a few horses. I ain't going 100 miles. Sorry. But where do the health benefits come from?
Oh, I rode a bicycle and played pickleball to train for this. I don't ride a horse in the United States. I don't ride. I hold on. I did the 84 days. I rode 32 different horses. So you do learn to stay on and stay safe. And actually, I was 30 days into the 90-day trip when one of the wranglers came over and said, Betsy, it's time you learn to rein your horse. It's like bothering other people, I said, well, what's that? No, so I really didn't. And I don't ride in the United States. And there's nowhere where you can train for a Mongolian half-broke, wild horse except Mongolia. But it is the kindest, gentlest culture. I support the Mongol Derby because the money to support those riders go to sustain the nomadic life of so many of the beautiful people there. I can't tell you. I'm obviously in love with Mongolia, and I have a horse there and a saddle, and now I bought a home in Mongolia. So I will go until they won't let me on a plane.
So I ran Meals on Wheels for 10 years in Iowa. And a lot of the conversation that we were having was, how do we improve lives beyond our interaction and delivery of a meal? And so many of the things that I'm hearing you talk about are things that we were trying to figure out how to encourage: connecting with other people, volunteerism and philanthropy and giving, being physically active. I turned 40 3 months ago. You've made me so excited about aging in a way that I did not expect this year. And I
About
really appreciate,
aging.
yes, no, literally. I'm like,
It's a
this
magic
is-
weapon.
your
Aging is.
your story is amazing, and I just really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you very much. And what you're doing with the dictionaries, I have to tell you, I grew up on a tobacco farm in Southern Maryland, and my mother had the 6 of us before she was 25 years old. She was one of 11. And my father did not believe in borrowing money, and she gathered, after we sold the tobacco, the Britannica encyclopedia gentlemen would come knocking on the farmers' doors. And my mother gathered the 6 of us together. I was 10 years old at the time. And she said, I'm going to pay $32.48 probably for the rest of my life on credit, but do not tell your father. And those encyclopedias came into our little household, and that made me want to be a international economic consultant for the World Bank. I wanted to go see the world. You get those pictures and that motivation in the household, and it opens up opportunities. Go with those dictionaries and information for the little ones, and let them dream. We have an English track at the school. So by 9th grade, these children could actually be an Amazon representative in their GARE or yurt with a little bit of a star link. And with English, say, may I help you with your order? And get some income into that household and move the family out of the dump.
I wanted to comment about living in the dump. It sounds horrible to us, but in fact, one woman's garbage is another woman's treasure. So I've seen many places around the world people live in the dump because it's so lucrative. Stinks, of course, but my question was, you mentioned the World Bank in your CV, and now, when was that and what exactly did you do? Several of us in the club, either you used to work for the World Bank.
Oh, really?
Or
Well, I started my career as a secretary for an economic development commission, and promptly got fired as the secretary and made an economic development representative because I wasn't in the office a lot. So I actually became director of that economic development commission in Charles County. And that led me to Leventhal and Horwath and Prince George's County Development. And then I started a company on Capitol Hill with a colleague, Mark Frazier, Free Zone Authority. And we did free trade zone development in developing nations and enterprise zone development in the United States. And then moved on. My son was a baby, and so I became a professor at a college for a little while. And then I pretty much dropped out and led a different life when I was previously married. And then this just happened. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I have a comment on behalf of the Mongolian community. I just wanted to say we just really greatly appreciate all the investment, the work that you've done in Mongolia. And I'm so glad our nature, our country has healed you mentally and physically. It has given you a lot, but in return, you also invested for this kids, 300 kids. And I was just really so proud of your work. And as a Mongolian myself, it is heartbreaking for me to see all those kids in the dumpsters. Oh, and you've done, you built a school and education, advocating for their education, so much work. And I just wanted to say thank you so much, Mrs. Betsy. Yeah.
My absolute pleasure, sweetheart.
We have a tradition in this club of planting a tree in honor of our speakers. So a tree will be planted in your honor for speaking to the club today.
Oh, thank you. Because we plant a lot of trees in our little communities and tech centers in the dump. And now they're 14 years old and they're little oases. So a tree is very, very important.
This will be in the Washington DC. It's part of the National Park Service, and
Couldn't
you
have
got it.
been a
And
better-
there will be coordinates, GPS coordinates
Mhm.
that you will have, and you'll be able to know exactly where your tree is.
Wow,
And you have
that
a
is an
little-
honor.
Little pin to go with.
Thank you. I'll put it right next to my nose. Thank you, Bob.